We've got a time clock here on a combi boiler, and this is a Ferroli Falcon, and it's actually stopped working. If we slide that across to there, it's supposed to come on continuously, and it's not actually working. And we've also got a few problems when we try to program it. So it looks like the clock has had its day, and it is about 10 years old, this particular boiler. So I've actually looked on the internet and I found a replacement one. I went on quite a few websites that sold gas spurs, and this time clock was about 60 quid, but I managed to actually get this one. And believe it or not, I actually bought it from eBay, and it's supposed to be a universal Ferroli time clock, so it should work with this boiler. Changing a time clock like this in a boiler should be a pretty simple thing, because it's only got 4 connections on it. But one thing you should never do with a boiler is attempt to do any gas work on it yourself. Not only is it illegal, it's dangerous, but I'm pretty sure that changing an electrical component like this is pretty safe as long as you do it correctly and follow a few basic safety guidelines. So we're going to start by switching the boiler off. So the boiler's switched off now, but also, just to be on the safe side, we're also going to remove the fuse. And that'll just prevent anybody from accidentally switching it back on whilst we're working on it. And then there's 2 screws under here that need removing before we can lift the cover off the boiler. And then the cover from the boiler just lifts straight up and off. And then we have to remove these 2 screws. So now we have to turn these 2 boys to 90 degrees, and then we can just pull the front of the boiler down. And now we've just got a couple of Phillips screws to remove. And then we can remove this cover. So we're just going to check that everything's dead using the approved voltage tester before we start, and we'll just confirm that the test is working by pressing the test function, and then we're just going to check by probing the actual wires going to the clock. And we'll just check a few more places on the PCB and everything just to make sure that it is completely dead. So we can be certain that that is dead. And then once you've done your test, you just need to confirm that your tester is still working by pressing that. So we're now confident that this is completely dead and it's safe to work on. In the corner here is the old time clock, and that's the new time clock. And we can see there that it's a type 884.1K, and that one is a type 884. Now it is 10 years old, so it's unlikely that you'll get an exact replacement, so it is slightly different. But what we're interested in are the terminal numbers at the back there, which is 1, 2, 3 and 5. And if you look at this new switch, it's got 1, 2, 3 and 5, which is exactly what we're looking for. So basically we've just got 4 Phillips screws in there that we need to undo, and then that time clock will lift out of there. Whenever you're doing a replacement like this, it's a like for like replacement, so it's dead easy. Never remove the wires until you're ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the 4 screws, undo the time clock, and then we're going to swap the wires over onto the new time clock, and then just screw that back in position. That way it's impossible to make a mistake and get the wires in the wrong positions. So the time clock should just lift up now out of there. I've actually set the time on the new clock as well before I install it. So it's really simple now. All I need to do is swap those 4 connectors over onto these 4 terminals. That's the first one, the number 1. That's the second one. Goes on to number 2. Because these wires are a bit short at the back and I don't want to pull them, I'm actually going to mark one of the spare connectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a black mark on the one that comes off number 5. So now I can remove those 2 because I know which one goes on which terminal. So now I can just move this into position. I know the black one goes on terminal 5. And that one goes on terminal 3. And then all we need to do is put that back in where it belongs, and we just need to tighten up the 4 screws. So that's the time clock fitted now. So now all we need to do is put everything back in the reverse order to what we took it off. So now we're going to put the cover back on. And then we'll just replace the screws. So now we can push the front back up. And we just need to turn those locators through 90 degrees. And then we just need to put the 2 screws back in the front. And now all we need to do is put the case back on the boiler. And when you put the case back on, it's important that you check that there's no trap wires or anything. And then we just need to put the 2 screws back in under here that hold the case on. So now all we need to do is put the fuse back in. And then switch the boiler back on.